an idea. Okay, so when you are installing JDeveloper, like you would give a Oracle Home path, right? So Oracle Home is nothing but a folder where you are installing. So your JDev installation path and your WebLogic installation path, for which you are installing the standalone server, both have to be different. Okay. So when you are installing the quick starter pack, so the JDev 1213 is basically the quick starter pack folder. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And if you plan to configure your standalone server, which is basically downloading everything separately and doing it, in that case you'll have to give a new folder. Like you shouldn't use the same JDev folder to install WebLogic and then install SOA and then configure the domains, etc. Okay, that is a regular mistake that people do, because JDev already contains a WebLogic server within it. So never mess it up. Like if you are configuring the standalone server, don't use the JDeveloper folder. Okay, I'm not sure if your case is same as this.
See.
Yep. Okay, so yesterday we have done an example with file adapter, wherein we have actually seen how to how to talk to your file system. Since everything in SOA has to talk web services, so Oracle SOA Suite Policy has given an adapter which basically wraps the underlying service which talks to your uh, what do you call the file system. Okay, so today we will quickly do a second example of the same file adapter. Okay, and we will see how do we actually use routing rules in Mediator. So till now, whatever examples we did, there is only one connection, right? Like you have a web service, there is only one wire, and Mediator only one wire with the service, right? So today we will see if a Mediator can connect to multiple services. It would be a very quick example. Okay, I won't concentrate much on that. I just wanted to show you the filtering in Mediator. And since we are always talking to only one service, which is like very rare, in SOA, like you would talk to multiple services. So just to have a feel of that, I will create a Mediator which talks to multiple file adapters. Okay, so our example today would be very simple, wherein we'll have a web service, okay, which has certain inputs, and it has something called country code. Okay, so based on the country code, we will invoke one of the file write services. Okay, so let me write it down here. MS Paint. Okay, so we have this input, or maybe today I'll be little quicker because okay, and on this one. Okay, so we'll create a service with two file adapters. Okay, each specific to a country. Okay, so let's say our input would be, say, product name, product code, and then price, and then country code. Okay, so based on the country code, our requirement is or this is the input, right? And then there would be two file write services. Okay, and then, or I would say something like this: if country code equals IND, okay, invoke file service 1. Okay, if country code equals US, I would say IN. Say invoke file service 2. So for now I'm creating two file services, but in real world this could be any service. Okay, so India, when if it is India, so you invoke a service which is specific to India. Just that we are in file adapters, we are using two file services. Okay, so first of all, the first thing is we'll create a schema. Okay, so since we don't have a schema which has country code, we'll create a new element. Okay, um, let's do one thing like okay, So yesterday we have published it to MDS, right? The moment, see the problem using right click option with MDS is the moment you right click and say publish to MDS, it vanishes off from your local system. Okay, so again if you want to like update it, you again have to get a local copy and then update it. Okay, that is the reason why I usually prefer doing the creation of jar file and creating a SOA bundle and things like that. Okay, but just to save some time, okay, let's create the a local copy of the schema.
I'm sorry. Ravi, so I didn't get that. So so this is actually my question. So if you publish to MDS, how did you change that?
Okay, how do you change that? It's very simple. Like you just get the copy into your local again, update it, and again you right click and save this. Okay, we'll do the same thing now. Okay, so we have this purchasing schema, right? File format. Okay, so let's go to the source, copy the same thing, and then in my schemas, let me create a new file. So let me create a new file of the same name. What is it? Purchasing schema, right? Okay, so let me create a new schema. Say you can have a new file or you can update the same file. Okay, so I'm copying the whole source here, and then just go to your MDS. Since we are again publishing it, I will just remove this. So right click delete, will remove the file. Okay, and then I have this one. Let me update it with our new element. Okay, so what shall we call? I will call it as what? Give me some name. Say country specific file request. Okay, some name. It doesn't matter actually. And then it should have 3 elements. Say PO number, say PO name, and then country code, and say another one is what is the other one? Price. All the other things doesn't matter actually. Right. Okay, and each one would be t-shirt.
Hey, it's a heavy
Okay,
noise.
so this will be the request, and let's say the file service 1 and file service 2 uses some format which is already there. So initial price, okay, we would say file format type. Okay, so let's use this schema for file service 1 and file service 2. Actually, they can use any different schemas, it doesn't matter. So when you're doing the example, you'll have some time, right? So create your own schemas and do it. So just to save some time, I'm just using this. Okay, I have updated this. So first thing is check your ADF config. If the connection detail is already there, yes, it is there, it is not vanished. Sometimes it goes off, there is a developer issue. I just right click and say share using. Okay, you should close it before publishing. Share schema, right? Say next and finish it off. Okay, so it has vanished, and then where is that? Okay. Share schema. Okay, it is here, and see it has gone. You have got this. Okay, so as I told you, like you will use the right click option only in dev environments, but usually in the higher environments, what you would do is all the shared artifacts you would do it in a jar file. If you remember, we have created these files in a jar, right? So when we did it in a jar and then SOA bundle and deployed, they did not vanish. So this is how you do it in real projects. Okay, but that takes time. So obviously, I mean, we prefer doing this in the sessions, but it is left to you. Like you know both the things, so you know how to use. So if you want to save some time, you can always try it. Okay, So let me use the same project. Okay, and then what is the process? So we'll have a web service client which uses the input, and then here the requirement is based on the country code. You will invoke one of the two file services, right? So let's create two file services. So first of all, we will create, where is the file? Okay, I would say it as file write service 1. Okay, just to show you the difference. Okay, and then I would say write file, and then directory name. You can use a logical name or physical name. Let's use a logical name. I would say file directory 1. Okay, and I would say p underscore percentile dot xml. Okay, all these we have seen yesterday, so I won't waste much time. So I want to import, but that is in MDS. I want to import the schema, right? Now okay, so import schema file MDS. What happened? Maybe it has gone out. So just yeah, this is a problem. You have to do it again then.
Ravi,
Yep.
hello.
Yep.
Actually, there is some noise from background.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
getting some
getting.
noise from background.
Is it coming? Is it still coming? I just muted myself. Like, is it still coming? Voice? Hello, guys. Are you still getting the disturbance?
No.
It's okay for me.
Oh, okay. Just in case if it is like too much, then just let me know. I'll connect through phone. Yesterday we had problems connecting through the phone, right? Okay. But then what's happening? Am I not saving it or what? It's J developer. Sometimes it works crazy. Okay, what happened now? Did not save it. Save. Usage. Okay. Close it. Reopen. Okay. Okay. So I'm basically creating a file adapter. For those of you where the screen refresh is little slow, I'm basically creating two file services. Okay. We have already seen how to create a file service. That's the reason I'm a little fast. Okay. There is nothing. I'm not doing any special configurations. Just that the ADF config is refreshing, and I'm not able to get the MDS, but just drag and drop. I will use it to write, and I will use a logical name. And then give some name. Here I would say service1 underscore sequence dot xml. And what is the type? Type I have already defined in the MDS, right? So let me go to my MDS purchasing schema and then say file format type. I'm using the same type which is done yesterday. Okay, I have one file service. and let me create another one. Okay, so when you are doing it, what you do is you create another schema for file service 2. Okay, I'm just using the same schema because I don't want to waste time in creating the schemas, but as an exercise you can use a different schema. Okay, I'm just importing from MDS and then using it. Okay, say next and finish it off. Okay, so I have two services. Okay, but obviously I want to expose them, right? So in order to expose it, you need to create a SOAP service. Correct? So I would say file, give some name, file pick service underscore client. You can give any appropriate name. Since we don't have the visitor, we will create a, this is one-way service, right? Just file writing, so it would be one-way service. And what is the input? Input, you have already defined it in your MDS, correct? So what is that? Country specific file request is the type, and say okay. Okay, done. But the problem is I cannot directly connect them, so I'll need a mediator. So I would say file pick mediator, or I would say file routing mediator, because it is routing to two different schemas. Okay, and then you connect your client to mediator, and then from here you will see the moment you create a wire, it will give you another starting point. So I will join. So see, this is how a regular SOA application would look like, wherein multiple components or multiple web services will be connected to your mediator. Okay, and if you observe here, there are two wires, right? So one wire goes from mediator to service 1, other wire goes from mediator to service 2. So in your mediator also there would be two routing rules. One is for this and one is for this. Okay, so when I double click on this, if you observe, first one is file write service 2, second one is file write service 1. Since I wired it in that order, it doesn't matter actually. Okay, now I have finished connecting everything. Okay, the only thing is I need to create a transformation, right? So let me leave the names as it is. Okay, and then let me do whatever. To your name, whatever. Okay. And price, I'm not doing any 90%, 80% here just to save some time. So done. Similarly, you create the transformation file for the other routing rule also, like for file service 1. Okay, this is actually very simple, like whatever you have been doing since yesterday. Okay, for now I'm actually directly putting country code in the nodes, but maybe for extra thing you could say, you can put a if condition saying if country code is IN, your node should be country, service for India is invoked or something like that. Okay, so you can do, you can always tweak whatever example I'm doing in the class, you always try to tweak it. Okay, so you can put an if condition here. We have seen how to put an if condition, right? Okay, so we are done with everything, like literally everything is connected now. Now what is left? The only thing left is, now if country is India, I want to invoke only file service 1. Okay, if country is US, I want to invoke only file service 2. So how will how will I filter it? That is where the filter expression comes into picture. Okay, so file service 1, when you want to invoke, when your inputs country code is US, right? It is as simple as this. And similarly, you want to invoke file service 2 when your inputs country code, okay, I just click on this, is equal to IN. Okay. Now you might be thinking like, if I give the condition IN here, if this is not validated, obviously it goes to the next condition. I mean, like if else, you would be thinking like these routing rules act as if else, but no, every routing rule will be executed. Everything is if only. Okay, so it will first come here, it will check the condition and then execute if it passes. So if it passes, it doesn't mean that it doesn't go to the next one. It goes to each and every routing rule. If there are 100 routing rules, it executes literally all the 100 routing rules, and in those, how many pass, so those will be executed. Okay, that is the reason why you need to put conditions on each and every routing rule if you have. Okay, so we are done now. So when it is India, we will invoke file service 2. When it is US, we will invoke file service 1. Okay, so are we done? Like, have we finished everything? Like, we haven't finished everything because we have used a logical name here, right? So we need to give a physical name to that. How do we do that? So you will just right click and say generate config file. Okay, and you can give an appropriate name. Did we use a dev already yesterday? I think we did, right? Resources. Okay, they are already there. So just delete them. Okay, and then create another one, because yesterday's dev config file had only one file, search replace thing, right? Because we had only one file adapter. Now we have three, so that is the reason why I'm deleting these two. Okay, and I'll create a config file again so that it comes up with all the three logical names now. Okay, so even in your development also, you'll take a backup of your earlier config file, delete it, you'll generate a new one, and then replace all the old ones. Okay, so I have generated, and if I come here, see, I would be having three different things. See, for pure, where is it? Okay, see, for file write service 1, I have one. For file write service 2, I have one. And then for PO write service, I'll have one. Here it is. Okay, so everywhere you need to replace the paths. Okay, so where is our path? So training here, policy batch 1, PO write service. So this is our, let's say for these two, I will use the same path, and for file service 2, I will use a different path. Okay, so this is all self-explanatory. We have done it yesterday. I'm not doing that. Okay, so when country is US, it will write to this folder. When country is India, then it will invoke file write service 2, which means it will actually write the file to this folder. Okay, so I've already started my servers, so let me deploy it, and I will deploy it as a new revision. Always when you change, you try to deploy it as a new revision, and this time you have to select the config file, right? Because we have used logical names. I'm sorry. So our batch 2. Finish. Okay, we'll quickly test it. Now let's not waste time anymore. So file adapter service 1.3. Okay, see, it has given me two options. Why? Because there are two endpoints in my file adapter, correct? So which one I need to select? I need to select file pick service. So file pick service. And what is my input? So I would say 123 PO name, price is 1, price is 123, and say country code is IN. Okay, so if country code is IN, it should invoke file write service 2. Okay, which means it has to put a file here. So here it is, PO underscore service 2. Okay, so when you give US, it goes to the other routing rule, and if you want to see the flow trace, it will give you what's happening. So you went to the mediator. So in the mediator, it first executed file write service 2, okay, because it is in that order. It evaluated to true, so it went to this transformation and then invoked the operation, okay. After this, it has not come out. See, this is not if else, this is like if for literally everything. Then again it went to the next routing rule, which is file write service 1 dot write, but since it is evaluated to false, nothing happened, okay, and it has finally come out because it has executed all the routing rules. So that is how a mediator works, wherein it basically works on the routing rules. It executes each and every routing rule based on how you define it works. Okay? So that's about a simple example that I wanted to show you, so that you can feel like I mean it is connected to multiple services, right? So when you have a BPEL process, you won't imagine like how many services. I mean, depending on your business requirements, some BPEL processes even invoke like 10 to 12 different services. Okay, when we do BPEL, we'll have that idea. Okay, so we are done with file service. So as an exercise yesterday, I've asked you to do the file read service. Okay, so you try to explore things, then you will learn more. Otherwise, it is the examples are always there in my blog. You can just try them looking at that. Okay. So that's about file. Today we'll look at the next most commonly used adapter. Okay, it's called database adapter. Now, what is a database adapter? See, in many a times, like you need to talk to the underlying database, right? So let's say you're talking to a JDE application. So in JDE, like literally everything is stored in a database table, right? So initially you need to connect to the JDE, and after that you want to talk to the database, or you want to talk to an SQL table to get some content. So whenever you want to talk to a table, how do you do it? If it is like regular Java, then you will have a SQL jars. You will import them, and then you will establish a connection, and then you will use prepared statements to get the data from the tables, right? But like that is a hectic task. Like you need to take care of all the connections, open the connection, close the connection, etc. Okay. Now that is pretty much like tidy process. Now, Oracle SOA Suite has given us a readily available component called database adapter. So what is a database adapter? See, in SOA, everything has to talk XML, right? So, but unfortunately, our database talks PLSQL or SQL, correct? I mean, it basically talks SQL. So, how do we make that SQL speaking database to talk XML? Basically, we need to wrap some code on top of the SQL so that it speaks XML, and that is what the database adapter does. Just like how your file adapter has wrapped the internal implementation and made you talk to the file system, similarly your database adapter will wrap the underlying implementation and make your SQL talking database work as a web service. Okay, so like dealing with the database adapter is not as straightforward as file adapter. There is some configuration that you need to do, and this configuration is completely administrative topic, but I would like to tell you that thing because like in development environment you will have to do it. Okay, so what are the basics of configuring a database adapter? So usage is very simple. Like you'll drag and drop that wizard, and you will select the table name, you will select the column names, and if you want to write or read, you'll have all the CRUD operations. So usage is very simple. Like it is similar to a file adapter, but you need to do certain configuration. What are the different configurations that you need to do? There are three configurations. Okay, first one is configuring data source. Second one is configuring connection pool. Third one is using connection pool GNDI in DB adapter wizard. Okay. So before we do this, we'll understand what is the data source, what is the connection pool, etc. Okay. So let's say there is a database. okay, or there is a file system, or there is a web service which will give you data, okay. Any service that gives you data is called a data source. Data source is a generic term, okay. I mean, it is not specific to SOA. Any damn thing that gives you data, when you call it, is nothing but a data source, okay. So in the context of database adapter, when it comes to data source, we are talking about the database, okay. So basically a database is nothing but a data source, okay. Even a file could be a data source, because a file has, let's say a file has all the phone numbers, and when you call it, it gives you phone number. That's a data source, okay. But we are talking about database adapter. So when you talk about data source, it basically represents a database, okay. So when you say configuring data source, that means establishing a connection to the underlying database, okay. And what is the second one? Connection pool. Okay, this is something I need to do. Let's say you have an application in which you want to talk to a database. Say I will pass on employee ID, I need to get all the information, okay. So it's very simple, like you create an SQL statement, you get the result, okay. But let's say there are like 1,000 requests coming at once. Then what will happen? First it has to create a connection, then execute the statement, get the results, right? Now in this whole process, creating the connection obviously takes more resources, correct? And after you are done, you have to release the resource, I mean release the connection, because like there are too many connections. You may have to use that connection for some other request, okay. So if you are dealing with all these things, obviously you need to write some code, and then you are basically wasting time at runtime, correct? So whenever the request comes, you are creating the connection, so it takes like milliseconds, which is a waste of time, because your SOA application may actually have 5 different database adapters. So creating 5 different connections at the runtime is like, it is unnecessarily waste of time, right? So instead, what WebLogic does is, it will have a pool of connections, okay. It will have a pool of connections which represent a connection to this data source, okay. So whenever a request comes, what SOA does is, it will go to this connection pool, get one connection, and use this connection to connect to the database. And once it is returned, then that connection will go back to the pool, okay. So it is like a pool of connections, okay. The advantage for this is, let's say 1,000 requests comes, then all the connections are readily available. You just have to fetch them and use it. Like, you are not wasting time in creating the connections, okay. And these connections are created at server startup. So maybe the first request will take time, but once all the connections are there, usually when do you deploy things? You deploy things late in the night, right? At midnight when the traffic is very low. So during that time, it will waste all the time. It will take all the time to create the connections in the pool. But once they are created, like all your requests behave literally very fast, right? So the same concept is used in SOA also. Like, we will create each dot I put here in the pool represents a connection to the data source, right? So we will actually create a connection pool which has n number of connections, which represents a connection to the data source, okay. So in this case, in the case of database adapter, what are the different things you need to do? Data source, connection pool, okay. So you will first create a data source, next you will create a connection pool, and you need to link this connection pool to the data source, correct? Because there would be different connection pools for different databases, okay. Let's say this is DB1, so this will have a specific connection pool. If there is a DB2, then it would have a different connection pool, okay. So this represents DB1, the other one represents DB2, okay. So you need to create a DB first, and then DB data source. Next is, you need to create a connection pool that represents connections to the data source. And then what is a JNDA? JNDA is nothing but a name, okay. So I mean, in simple terms, you can say these connections or every resource in WebLogic is actually called using the JNDI name, okay. So it's basically a name in your registry, okay. So using that name, you will use it. So you will give a specific name to this. Instead of DB1, I would say a proper name. and then I will use that name to represent the DB. So it's kind of an alias name. Okay. So let's see how we do it. So all these three steps, or I would say step 1 and 2, are done in WebLogic console. So WebLogic server console. Okay, you're not doing it in Enterprise Manager because it is not specific to, these concepts are not specific to SOA. These are like generic concepts. Even in Java also, you would have a connection pool. So let's do step 1 and 2 in your WebLogic console. Okay. So where is the console? Console would be in your admin server, right? I would say localhost and then console. Okay. My first target is to do the data source. So where do you configure the data source? Go to services and go to data sources. Okay. So here I'll click on new and say generate data source. Okay. So what is your data source? I would say this as 12C batch 1 data source. Okay. And then give a JNDI name. This could be as simple as this, but usually I would say it as JNDI slash DB slash. This is the standard format. Okay. So you can give any name. It doesn't matter. You can give your name also. It doesn't matter. It has to be unique. That's all. So just give some name and copy it somewhere. Okay. So let me do it here on. So this is my data source, because always you will represent, you will connect to the data source using the JNDI name, but not the physical name. So once I do that, I will say next. Okay, and then Oracle driver and say next. See, what is a data source? It is nothing but a connection to a database, right? So give your database details. Database name is what? XC, localhost. So if your project has different database, you give them. Okay. Now I'm talking to tables, right? So I have HR schema in my XC edition. Everyone has XC HR schema. So I'll use the HR schema because it has all the employee tables. HR password is also HR. Say next and test it if it is working. Yes, it is working. Say next. And then to which service you want to associate this JNDI. I want this to be available in both admin and SOA servers, and say finish it off. Okay.
Ravi, Kumar here.
Yeah, Kumar.
Suppose while installing the database, if I used to use the inbuilt Windows account for logging into database, is there any difference here for connecting to database for creating JNDA or data source name?
Okay, so these details, whatever you are giving, they are the credentials for connecting to your schema. Okay, so if you are using Windows credentials and if they are working for your database, you can use the same ones. Okay, it could be anything. In my case, like it was HR is the schema, or let me show you. Okay, so see HR. I have all these tables in the HR schema, so that is the reason I'm using. If your database has some other credentials through which you can connect, you can use those credentials. So ultimately, you're basically connecting to the underlying database. You give those credentials. It could be anything.
Yeah, fine.
Okay. So I've created a data source. Okay, so what did I do? Basically, I created a connection, like a single object in this pool I've done till now. Like I created a data source. Okay. And what is my next step? I have to create a pool of such things, right? So how do you do that? Now I am talking about the database adapter. So you go to the deployments and then see there will be a database adapter. Now if you clearly observe, you see AQ adapter, database adapter. If I go to next, I will even see file adapter. Okay, I will even see enterprise manager. So basically all the blocks that you see here, they are nothing but applications that are installed on your WebLogic server, or in that case I would say they are the libraries that have come with your SOA application. Okay, so when I do this, when I drag and drop, so how does it work? Like it has to have some logic, right, to work, to do all the protocol conversions and all. So that is basically this application. Okay, so in your deployments, literally every adapter is nothing but a Java based application. Okay, so let me go to the database adapter, configuration, outbound connection pools. Okay, so this is where my connection pools are configured. So I'll create a new connection pool. This is a one-time step, don't worry, and this is completely administrative topic. As a SOA developer, you will never do it. I mean, you will ask your admin to do it. Okay, so even if you don't understand, don't. And the standard format for doing for the JNDI name is EISDB for the connection pools. Okay, and give some name. I would say 12C batch 1 connection pool. You can give literally any name. Okay, or I would say conf pool, just to make it a little smaller, and say finish it off. Okay. Now, did I miss anything? I created a connection pool. Okay, so basically I created a pool, but nowhere I said that use this data source, right? Now, where did I do that? So in the same screen, again, I mean, when you finish it off, it comes back. So click on the one that you have defined just now, 12C batch 1. Okay, so here you have something called XA data source. So this is where you will connect to your data source. Okay, so what is my data source name? This is my data source name, right? So just click on this one, single click, and then you have to enter it. If you tab it, I mean, it doesn't work. You have to enter. I'm sorry. I clicked on tab, that is why it did not come. You have to say enter, and it comes up, right? And then just say save. Okay. 99% of the times, straight away it works. Sometimes you need a restart. Okay. So when I'm using the database adapter, 99% of the times it happens in runtime because I did some configurations, right? Configurations usually take 100% effect when you do a restart. So I'm done with the configuration. So while I'm doing my application, let me restart my SOA servers. So I'm just stopping everything. So till now what we have done is we have basically done the configuration for your database adapter to connect to the underlying database. Okay. Then what is the third one? Okay, third one is
Ravi, one quick question.
yes.
Ravi, sometimes people will say connection is not established, and they will say connection refresh the connection pool. So what does it mean by that?
Refresh the connection. You mean refresh the connection pool or?
Yes, refresh the connection pool. Correct.
Okay, so refresh the connection pool is, let's say you have I mean, see, this cannot have unlimited number of connections, right? It will hold a maximum number of connections because connection is nothing but a memory. It takes memory, right? So you will define like it should have 1,000 connections or so. Okay, let's say you have like 10,000 requests coming in, then you are out of your connection pool, correct? So in that time, there are two things, like the other requests will wait for the connections to become free so that they can fetch it. But let's suppose all of the processes which has taken your connections have stuck in between. Okay, so all the connections are being used with all the different requests, and the other requests are in the pool waiting for the resources, and these connections are never coming back because they are like stuck. Okay, so in this case, it is as good as you have a connection pool, but you don't have connections. Okay, and there is no way that these connections are freed up because they are stuck. In that case, you'll have to restart it, or basically you don't have to restart the entire server, you just have to restart the application that contains the connection pool. In our case, I mean, if you're talking about this thing, you just have to restart the DB adapter application that we have seen in the console. So when you refresh it, all these will be gone, and then you'll have a brand new connection pool with everything. Okay, and the source why it is getting stuck, you can actually debug it. Let's say if it is stuck on something, you can actually modify it so that everything works fine. Okay.
Ravi, Kumar again. See, the DB adapters generally should have some sort of timeout for the connections in the connection pool, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, it will have timeout, but sometimes it may happen that the control itself gets stuck. Okay, so there is no way that the timeout works. In such cases only you will come into that thing. Otherwise, I mean, the infrastructure lets you to free up after some time. But if that infrastructure itself is stuck, then there is no way that they're coming back, right? So in such cases, you'll have to refresh it, but it's very rare.
But what? Yeah, but what will happen in production? Because you cannot do that, right? You won't do that regularly,
No,
refreshing the DB connection.
exactly. In production, actually, this will never happen. Like once in a while, very rare case it happens. Okay, because you obviously have the connection timeout, right? So if something gets stuck after the connection, the instance goes down. I mean, the instance gets terminated, and you get the connection back. So in production, I mean, you never face this issue, but just in case if you face this issue, that is the remedy. Okay, if you don't have connections, there is no other possibility, like you have to get them back, or you can actually increase the number of connections also. Let's say 1,000 connections is not catering your purpose, so make them say 1,500. But to make them 1,500, you have to have memory. So you just have to increase your SOA server memory and then increase the connection. It all depends on the admin. Like if they have memory, they'll increase it. Otherwise, they'll just have to wait to get all the connections freed up. Okay, so coming back, so we have established all the required infrastructure for creating a database, for working with the database adapter. So let's do the first example with database adapter. Okay, so I'll create a new SOA project, and then I would say DB read service. Okay, so basically this will read a database table and get me some results. Okay, so which table should I read? So let me go to my HR schema. This is my HR schema. See, all the XE database will have this HR schema, but by default it is locked. Okay, by default when you install it, your HR schema will be logged. So you just have to use this command. When you say, see, when you say SQL plus in your command prompt, when you say HR and HR, if it comes like, if it goes inside, then you're good, it is unlocked. But usually when you are doing it for the first time, you will say HR is locked. Okay, then just use this command called alter user HR identified by HR account unlock. Okay, I'm just putting this in the chat window, just copy it. Okay, just in case if your thing is locked, you need to use this command. Once it is done, it will say HR is unlocked, and then you can use the HR schema. Or if you are really interested and if you are very good with SQL, you can create your own tables. Okay, so creating tables is not the point here. Working with the tables is the point. Okay, so I have this table called employees, which I will try to read it. Okay, so and I have the data also. Select star from employees. So this HR schema will have all the data also. Okay, so in my DB adapter, in this example, what we'll do is we'll try to read this table. Okay, so we'll pass an employee ID. We'll try to get the first name, last name, and salary. Okay, so we'll see how do we talk to a database. So if you want to talk to any database, the process is still the same. You just have to connect to a table and get it. Okay, so we already established a data source. We are working on the example. So for any SOA composite, what is the first step? You need to define a schema. Okay, in order to define a schema, you need to have the requirement. The requirement is I will pass on the employee ID. Okay, and then I will get the first name, last name, and say salary. You can get anything you want. Okay, so in my case, my input would be, for this example, my input would be employee ID, output would be, or say response would be, I would say employee ID, first name, or I would say full name, and then salary. Okay, say department ID also. Okay, so let us build an example that gives me all this. So first thing is I need to define a schema. So just to save some time, I will create a local schema. In your case, create the schema in MDS. Okay, so I will create a schema. I would say DB read service schema. Okay, so I would say input sequence, and then I will say employee ID. Integer. And what is my output? Same. We do appropriate names. Oh, I would say full name, right? But see, my database gives me first name and last name separately, so I'll concatenate it. So department ID is integer, salary is double, full name is string. Just stop me whether if you don't understand anything. Integer. Okay. If you don't know the syntax, you can always do this and search for the string. Okay, so you have all the database. Okay, so I have the schema. Okay, I'm not publishing it to MDA. Actually, I can publish it from here itself. So let me. Okay, it is there. So what I will do is just publish. Okay, you need to close it. So let me publish it. Okay, I won't publish because I want to modify it again, and again I want to import. So let me keep it local only. Okay. So what is my thing? So how does my composite look like now? Just try to imagine before I do it. Okay, so I have 3 sections in my composite, right? So I'm reading a database, correct? So I will need a database adapter, correct? So I'll have a database adapter in the references section. And this database adapter will ultimately talk to my underlying database. How will it talk to the underlying database? Using the JNDI name of the connection pool, correct? So I will use this JNDI name in configuring my DB adapter. Okay, and then I want to expose it, right? I want a web service client which takes in employee ID and then gives back whatever those 4 elements. Okay, and since I cannot directly connect it, I need a mediator in between. So I will have the web service connected to mediator, and then this guy connects to the database adapter, and then the response flows back, and then here it flows back. So basically this is a synchronous service in this case because it is getting the response back, and then you need to do some transformation here, correct? I mean, you need to concatenate full name, etc. So let's do it straight away. I think by now you are more familiar with how to do composites and all. Okay, so here's your JDeveloper. You're talking to a database, so let's use a database adapter. I would say DB read service. Okay, 1 because I want to do another example. Okay, now see this here it is asking for a connection, and then here it is asking for a JNDI name. Okay, so now let's see what it is. A database. Now this is one of the very important interview questions. Okay, like this is a standard interview question anyone will ask. So let's clear ourselves. Okay, so what is a JNDI name? It says a database connection is required to configure this adapter. select a database connection already defined in your project or create a new connection. Okay, that is for the connection. And then what is the JNDI name? So basically here we have seen, right, in order to talk to a database, we need a data source, but that data source we are creating a number of data sources in a connection pool, and we will use this connection pool's JNDI name to connect to the database, right? So what is our connection pool's name? It is this one. Okay, so I am giving it in my database adapter. Fine. Okay, so with this I can connect to the database. Okay, now again, why should I give the connection information here? Because indirectly this is referring to my data source, right? And why should I again give the connection? Okay, so this connection is just for the design time part. Okay, just understand, your application will use this name at the runtime to connect to your database, correct? Now why is this? Is because, like in this case, what are we doing? Like we are basically passing in the employee ID to get all the details, right? So basically the query would look like select first name, last name, salary from employees where employee ID is equal to incoming employee ID. Like you have that SQL, right? So since I know employee table, I can directly write the SQL. Okay, so if I can directly write the SQL, I don't need this connection. I mean, I can write the JCF file and I can do it. But let's say this database table which I'm talking to is some table in SAP which I'm not really aware of. Okay, so I need the design time assistance. Like if I have a visual representation, then it will be very easy for me, right? So for that purpose, you'll have to create this connection. So this is just for design time, it won't be used at the runtime. Okay, so this is one of the important questions. So I would say local connection.
Ravi Kumar here. So the connection name, whatever you are creating here, are you using in this particular, using it for design time? This connection name can be different from what you are used for configuring JNDI.
Exactly.
Like that,
See,
right?
it is local connection. I mean, I can give any name. Yes, correct. So I test this, which is success. I can give any name. See, my connection name is local connection, which doesn't make sense and which doesn't have any relation with the JNDI that I've created. Okay, so this is just for the design time purpose, and I'll show you by defining this what will I get. So when I say next, what is the operation that I want to give? We'll look at all the operations in next example, but I want to do a select, right? I want to select employees. Say next. Okay, so import tables. So this is where the connection comes into picture. So if I know the SQL, I can directly write it, but since say I'm very new to SQL, as a SOA developer, I don't even have to know SQL. So when I say query, see, it uses that connection, design time connection, to get all the tables. I would say employee, say okay, say next. It also has the relationships. So I don't want any relationships. You can just remove them also, or you can keep them, doesn't matter. And say okay. See, it read the table and gave me all that are available. Okay, so if I didn't give that, I would not have all these things. So what all I want, I will select.
So where exactly, see, I understand when you use this connection, it is importing all the table definitions only.
Correct. Right? Yes. Yes.
And this table definitions, again, it is it stored as part of your what do you call the schema?
No.
Design schema.
No. So whatever you are seeing, this is coming at runtime. So what you can do is before this step, okay. So before this step, after you create the connection, when you are at this point, you try to stop your database. When you do this, it won't go to the next step. Okay. So that shows that you are directly talking to the database and getting all these details. Okay. Nothing is stored. Till now, nothing is stored. Like when we finish it off, something is stored. Like whatever you select, based on that, the schema is created. But whatever you see here is all like it is coming on the fly from the database. Say, so I've selected whatever I want. Say next. Okay. So this is my SQL. See, it assisted me in creating the SQL. Okay. So it says select so and so from employees. when this gives me literally everything, right? If there are 1,000 employees, it gives me everything. So ideally what it should be like, where employee ID is equal to something coming inside, right? So maybe I want to add a parameter called employee ID. This is self-explanatory. And then I'm writing a where clause. Edit, say add where employee ID equals parameter employee ID. Okay, this is like a binding parameter. Like if you already know SQL, you need not use all these things. You can directly write it. Okay, so where employee ID is equal to your incoming employee ID. So this one you will map it in the mediator. Say next, next, and finish it up. Okay, so I'm done with my DB service. Okay, so this DB service basically has a variable which you need to stuff. So you need to basically stuff in this employee ID and it will give you all these four. Okay. Now what is our next step is to create a SOAP web service. I would say DB read client so client 1, and what is the input, what is the output? It is a synchronous service. Input I defined in my schema. Sorry, this one, right? Input and then output. Okay, say okay. Now you want to have a mediator which connects both. Oh, I should have given a proper name, but that's okay. Give a proper name when you do it. And I'm connecting these two. Okay. So now what's happening? Like you are giving the employee ID as the input, right? So it is your the mappings doesn't happen automatically, and this guy is expecting the employee ID, correct? Because we have created a bind parameter. So it is your duty to map the ID to this ID, and you will map the response, just like how we are doing. So when you do the wiring, you get a routing rule. Since there is only one wire, you get only one routing rule, wherein I will create the request transformation. Okay, and I will map my incoming employee ID to the employee ID of the DB adapter. Okay, and what does it give me back? It gives me back the first name, last name, whatever we selected in the DB adapter. See, if you see here, it gave me whatever I selected, plus the primary key, obviously. So I would map them, and full name is concatenation, right? So I would say concat of my first name, whatever. Okay, so first have map it and then say first name. Maybe I want to add a space in between, so I would say here space and then salary to salary, department ID to department ID. So I'm done. So I've connected the request, connected the response. So I'm done. So let me check if the servers are running. Okay, servers are running. So let me deploy it. So right click, deploy. Okay. So we have employee ID 101. Let us give the same here. You can actually use this to create a SOAP UI project and do it. So I would say 101 and set as web service. So ideally what should happen? We got some response. So leave it, but let's look at the flow trace, see what happens. So I got the request and then it invoked the two-way operation, DB read service. It received a response and then the response is transformed and you got a final response to your client. Okay, so if you see this, here it is. Your employee name, first name is, full name is concatenated, salary and department. Okay, so this one, okay, we have given employee ID, it gave me single result. What if I gave a department ID? I want all the employees in a particular department. Okay, in that case, you will have multiple instances of the same response, right? Because every employee will have these 4 tags and then you will have these 4 tags repeated. Okay, so how do you achieve that? Since it is only one employee ID, I'm good. If I use the same schema to give department ID and get the all the employees, if I use the same schema, it would give me only one employee. Okay, if I want to have multiple instances of some element, how do I define the schema? Okay, or in other words, simple thing, like if my requirement is input is department ID, output should be all employees in that department. Okay, so how do I get this? How would my response look like? Okay,
You create a complex type and make that complex type as a repeatable min occur and max occur.
exactly. Yep, that is what we will do now. That's correct. So, and then Pawan is right. Okay, so if you want to look at your previous instances, so just look at this and search, you get the instance, and then I just want to show you the previous. Okay, so this is your output, right? So this is my output if I have only one employee. I'm just trimming out the headers. Okay, but if I have multiple employees, then I would have something like this, right? So how would I achieve that? So that is where you will use the complex elements. Okay, so what is a complex element? Complex element is nothing but an element which can be used as a type. Okay, so you can actually go to W3 schools to learn more about the complex type. Actually the name is complex type, but it is very simple. Okay, so let me define the schema. When I define the schema, you will understand what it is instead of explanation. So let me, this is my requirement wherein my input is just a single element for department ID. This I know how to do it. My output is basically a list of employees, right? List of employees, correct? Should be all employees in a department. So list of employees. So I want to repeat this employee type n number of times. So how do I do that? So how, if I want to repeat something, I will create that type as a complex type. So you have something called complex type here, drag and drop, I would say individual employee, okay, and then it will have all these 4. Okay, so my individual employee will have employee name, full name, salary in this one, and then I want this to be repeated n number of times, right? So how I do that is I will create a new element and I will call it as employee list. Okay, every element has to be with a sequence, and then this employee list will have repeated individual employees. Okay, so I'll create an element called employee, and define its type. Instead of string or integer, I'll define its type as the complex type. So whatever complex type I define, it will be coming here. I'll do this. Okay. So employee list will have employee, and employee itself is like 4 elements, right? Okay. Now this employee list will have only one employee. I want to make it n. So how I do it is, if you are very familiar with XML schema, you can directly write it like min occurs, max occurs. But just in case if you are new to this, so go to the properties window and say properties. Is it not coming? Okay. Okay, click on this and say window properties. What happened? Sometimes this state developer works. Okay, or let me do it straight away. I mean, there is some problem with me, with my developer, but I would say here max occurs is unbounded. Okay, means it can have 1 to infinite number of employees. Okay, so how many employees you want to stuff depends on you, but the schema gives you flexibility to have as many employees as you want. Okay, so I have defined the schema. So in my case, my input would be what? Department ID, right? So this is employee ID. I can use the same schema. Instead of employee ID, I can send in department ID, but I don't want to confuse you. So I would say department ID input. So this will be my input, right? It. Okay. So this will be my input and this will be my output. So I have my inputs and outputs. Let me create a DB adapter. Okay. So drag and drop a DB adapter. I would call it as multi-select DB adapter. What is the JNDI name? Copy the connection pool and then you can give this. Say next. Select operation. What is the table? Employees table. And my query would look like select star from, or select full name, first name, last name, salary from employees, where department ID is equal to so and so, right? So I can actually remove the relationships. This will give me extra data which I don't want. So whatever I want, just take that. Let me take only first one to avoid second two. Okay. So here my something it would be like where department ID equal to some bind parameter. So instead of writing that which is error prone, I can always use the editor to do it. I'm giving some variable. Okay. I would say var department ID. And then I would say where department ID equals bind parameter department ID. Okay. And I will stuff in this with the department ID. And then finish it. Okay. And I need a SOAP endpoint, right? I would say multi-select DB read service, which is a synchronous service. And whose output is that? Employee list. Okay. See, if you observe, you are getting only normal elements to be selected, like you don't get the complex element. Say finish it off. Mediator, let me leave it as it is. Okay. So open the mediator. In the input, you have to map the department ID, right? So incoming department ID to the department ID of the query. I'm done. Now mapping your output is little different. Okay. So till now, how are we doing? Till now, how are we doing? Like we have these two, like employee ID, we are mapping full name to full name, etc. Okay. But in this case, I'm not getting a single employee, but I will get multiple employees depending on the department ID, right? So basically your employee tag here repeats, okay? And your employee tag repeats for every incoming employee, correct? So there is a tag called for each. You know how a for each works, right? It is similar to Java or any other language. So for each employee, so for each incoming employee, what you want to do? I want to map employee ID, first name, salary, department ID. So these four mappings is still the same, but since till now it is only one element, we don't have the for each. But in this case, we are getting multiple elements. So for each multiple element, I want to map these things. Okay, and then I'm done. So let me deploy. So you might be observing that we are using XSLT again and again. So as a SOA developer, like one thing you have to improve as and when, like every time, is be familiar with XSLT. The more XSLT you know, the easier your job will be. Okay, so let me first do it here. Say 30. How many are there? I think 2 guys are there. Or let me do it as 80. Okay, it has so many. So let's use 80. Okay, it is finished. Okay, when you single click on this, you can get all the deployed composites here, or you can expand that. And see, there is a green dot. Green dot represents a default composite. Okay, see, my file adapter, there are how many? 1, 2, 3 versions, 3 revisions of file adapter, right? But the green icon is only on 1. What it means is, okay, I don't want to deviate now. I will tell you after this. Let us test our multi-select first. So let me give the department ID of 80. See how many employees we got. Here, if you go to the XML view, you will exactly know. So let me copy paste the whole thing here. See, it has basically repeated the employees. Okay, so it has how many? 145 to, like, literally some around 179 is like 40 employees. Okay, so my schema let me actually repeat the employees n number of times. How many times? It depends on your XSLT, or it depends on your response. I got 30 elements from my database adapter, so I got 30 elements from the response. Okay, so this is how you use a DB adapter. So how complex your project is, like I can show you an example where I'm talking to the JDE system for field service. There also I'm talking to a database. What I do is just give the input, get the response, do the manipulation. Okay, SOA is all about manipulating your data. You'll have 10 different services. Talk to one, get some data, and from that you proceed to the next service, get some data. It is all about invoking different services, manipulating with the data. That is the reason why I tell you XSLT is one of the very, very important things. Like if you know more XSLT, like you'll have a better name in the project. As simple as that, because people don't focus much on XSLT. Okay, so this is how you use a DB adapter. So any questions till now? In fact, my blog swordtutor.com has 3 articles on database adapter. Okay, maybe you can go through whatever I've explained today. It is very clearly given, and what is a data source, what is a connection pool, generally everything is explained here. Maybe you want to go through that. Okay, and transactions, all the transactions are internally taken care, all are exceed, sorry, what is that, I forgot. If a web service inbound, timeout, need to roll back the transaction. Okay, like all the transactions will automatically taken care by the database adapter. You don't have to worry. Like if you have 3 different, in a BPEL process, like if you are invoking 3 different database adapters one after the other, let's say you write something on database adapter 1 and then something goes wrong in database adapter 2, your BPEL process will take care of rolling back. Okay, so all these boilerplate things you don't have to worry when you're working with SOA Suite. Everything it will take care. That is the advantage when you have a SOA tool over your Java. Okay, so that's all about this. Maybe as an assignment, when you're doing it, you do this example wherein you read the employee table for all the employees, for you can hard code a department ID, and then write all those into separate files. Okay, so what I mean is, as an assignment you can do this. So composite holds on employee table, read all employees for department ID 80, write them to a file with each employee on a different file. Okay, so in this case, like your source would be a database adapter which reads your table, and then you'll have a mediator in between where you'll do all the transformation, and then you will write it to a file. Okay, so try to do it as an example. Hey, did I start the video? Okay.